Hi, I'm John, and in today's video we're going to talk about seventh chords and how those chords are used in Bach. So what is a seventh chord exactly? A seventh chord is just a triad that has a seventh added on top of it. Seventh chords can be classified according to the triads used, whether major, minor, augmented, or diminished. They're also classified according to the seventh used, whether major, minor, or diminished. Now in Bach, seventh chords are treated in a way similar to non-harmonic tones in his music. Non-harmonic tones are dissonances that are meant to be resolved into consonances. Likewise, the seventh in a seventh chord is a dissonance that is intended to be resolved into a consonance. This concept of a seventh chord as a dissonant chord that has to be resolved into a consonant chord runs through common practice music, but it's certainly not really included in modern music, in a lot of modern music, like jazz, for example, which often treats seventh chords as consonances. Seventh chords, since they're classified as dissonant chords, are treated the same way as non-harmonic tones are treated elsewhere in Bach. And so they're classified according to the process of what's called preparation and resolution. This is exactly like what's done with non-harmonic tones, except in this case, the seventh of the seventh chord is what's being prepared and resolved. So based on how the seventh in the seventh chord moves through a progression of three chords, the preparatory chord, and then the seventh chord and the resolution chord, depending on how the seventh moves, we can have passing tone figures, neighbor tone figures, suspension figures, etc. Now every style of music has its own set of seventh chords that it tends to focus on, and Bach's music isn't any exception. In this video, we're just going to go over the three most commonly used seventh chords in the music of Bach: the dominant seventh chord, the supertonic seventh chord, and the leading tone seventh chord in minor. The dominant seventh chord is the one that Bach uses most frequently. Obviously, it's built on the dominant degree of any scale, whether it be major or minor, and it always employs a major triad, whether you are in major or minor. And the seventh is always a minor seventh. Here's an example of a dominant seventh chord with a passing tone figure. Here's an example of a dominant seventh chord with a suspension figure. Honestly, I could include tons of examples here that are in different inversions and such, but let's just stick to root position for most of these examples, unless otherwise indicated. Otherwise, this video might go on for infinity. Dominant seventh chords, as you might expect, are often used in authentic cadences, and so they most generally lead straight to the tonic chord. And speaking of progressions, I'm really hoping to progress to the tonic soon. I mean 1,000 subscribers, so please do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons now. That would do a great deal of good for my channel. Next up, we have the supertonic seventh chord, which is the second most commonly used seventh chord in the music of Bach. In major keys, it's a minor triad with an added minor seventh. In minor keys, it's a diminished triad with an added minor seventh, otherwise known as a half-diminished seventh chord. But probably the most distinct feature of the supertonic seventh chord in the music of Bach is that it practically always employs the suspension figure. Why is this? Well, it's simply because of the chords that precede and follow the supertonic in these progressions. If the chord that goes before the supertonic seventh chord is the tonic chord, then you're already hearing the seventh of the supertonic chord before the supertonic chord sounds, which means that you're going to have a suspension figure. And the same is true if the chord that goes before the supertonic chord in the progression is a submediant chord. When you hear the submediant chord, you're already hearing the seventh of the supertonic chord, so you're already set up for a suspension figure. Here are some examples of progressions employing the supertonic seventh chord in major and minor keys. Last but not least, we have the leading tone seventh chord in minor. This chord is basically just a diminished triad built on the leading tone, which has a diminished seventh stacked on top of it. We call this a diminished seventh chord. For brevity, let's stick to examples in root position. This chord usually follows chords like the subdominant in root position or first inversion, or sometimes the root position of the supertonic seventh chord, and usually resolves to the tonic. Here are some examples. Just for fun, I would add here that this chord deserves its own video, simply, if only because you can use the diminished seventh chord to do so many amazing things like transitioning smoothly from one key to another, even if those two keys are totally distant from each other on the circle of fifths. It's very easy to transition from one key to another to almost any key you want if you use a diminished seventh chord. But that's a topic for another video that I might make soon. And that's it for the video today. It's not that there's not a whole mountain of stuff I could say more on this topic. It's just that I just ran out of time to say it in. But anyway, if you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.